The sound of laughter echoed through the quiet mountain diner, but it wasn't the kind that came from joy. It was the cruel, mocking laughter of men who believed the world owed them power. The sun outside was soft, spilling golden light across the snow-covered ridges, but inside, something dark was unfolding. A young waitress named Emily stood frozen beside a booth of leather-clad bikers, her trembling hands clutching the collar of her shirt as one of them sneered and yanked at it. The coffee cup she had been holding shattered on the floor, spilling hot liquid across her white shoes and pooling beneath her shaking knees. Fear burned behind her eyes, not just for her safety but for the helplessness that came with knowing no one might step in. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and standing up for what's right, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Every small action spreads a little more good into the world. The diner had always been Emily's place of peace. It sat on the edge of a long stretch of highway that ran through the Rockies, where truckers stopped for hot coffee and travelers took a break from the cold. She worked long hours with a soft smile and a quiet strength that people admired but rarely noticed deeply. What no one knew, and what Emily had gone out of her way to keep hidden, was that her older brother Logan was the leader of the Hells Angels chapter that ruled that region. Logan had raised her after their parents died in a car crash. He had kept her far from his world, the world of roaring engines, leather vests, and brotherhood forged through scars and loyalty. He always told her, "Stay clean, Em. I'll carry the dirt of this world so you don't have to." That morning had been like any other. Emily wiped down tables, filled coffee cups, and smiled at strangers. But when the group of unfamiliar bikers rolled in, loud engines, cruel eyes, patches from another gang, something in the air shifted. They weren't there to rest. They were there to dominate, to show off. One of them, tall and smug, called her sweetheart in a tone that felt like poison. She tried to laugh it off and walk away, but the taunts grew louder. When she refused to play along, one grabbed her wrist, another reached for her shirt. That's when fear turned to panic. The sound of fabric tearing was like a scream. Her chest heaved as she struggled, her voice breaking as she told them to stop. But they only laughed louder, feeding off her terror. The other customers sat frozen, eyes down, afraid to get involved. The diner, once warm and safe, became a stage of humiliation. Her heart raced, her hands trembling, as she tried to pull her shirt together. Her face flushed with tears and shame, but even in that moment she didn't cry out for help. She didn't want to give them that satisfaction. And then the door chimed. 3 men walked in, their boots heavy on the checkered floor. The tallest among them, broad shoulders, white beard, leather vest with the unmistakable patch of the Hells Angels, stopped dead when he saw the scene. His name was Logan. Behind him were 2 of his brothers, men who had seen things most couldn't imagine. Their faces hardened, eyes narrowing like a storm rolling over the mountains. The laughter at the booth died instantly. Logan didn't shout. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than thunder. His eyes fell on Emily, her torn shirt, the spilled eggs and coffee on the table, and the fear etched across her face. For a split second, he wasn't the leader of the Hells Angels. He was just a brother watching the one person he swore to protect tremble in front of him. Something inside him cracked open, a rage so deep it felt ancient. He walked forward, each step deliberate, the room falling completely still. The bikers who had been laughing now stared, realizing too late who they had messed with. Logan's brothers moved with him, one blocking the exit, the other standing behind the men at the booth. The tension was electric, the kind that made your heart pound in your ears. Emily whispered, "Logan, please don't." But he wasn't listening to words anymore. He was listening to the pulse of his heart and the echo of promises made long ago that no one would ever hurt her again. What happened next was chaos, but it wasn't loud. It was fast, precise, controlled. Logan's men didn't need to shout or threaten. The bikers were disarmed, not just physically but emotionally, by the realization that they had crossed a line no man should ever cross. Logan didn't lay a hand on them at first. He just leaned forward and said in a voice that could freeze blood, "You don't touch a woman in fear. Not ever. You especially don't touch my sister." The words landed like a hammer. The realization spread through the group like wildfire. The young woman they had humiliated was family to the man whose name carried weight across the entire state. One of the bikers stammered an apology, but it was useless. Logan's fist met his jaw before the sentence finished. The diner shook with the impact. Another tried to stand but was shoved back against the seat, his laughter gone, replaced with the sound of regret and broken pride. When it was over, the room was silent again. Logan turned to Emily, his hands still trembling, his eyes softening for the first time. He took off his leather jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders, covering her torn shirt. "Let's go home," he said quietly. Outside, snow had begun to fall, slow, quiet flakes that softened the world's sharp edges. Emily leaned against him as they walked to his bike. For the first time in years, she didn't care who knew who she was. She wasn't ashamed of her brother's life anymore. She understood now that his darkness had always been used to protect her light. Over the next few days, word spread fast through every bar and biker road from Colorado to Montana, a warning told in whispers and fear. "Don't mess with the girl. From Ridge Diner. She's the angel's sister." But for Emily, it wasn't about revenge or fear. It was about finding her strength again. She returned to work a week later, her head high. People looked at her differently, not with pity but with respect. She was no longer the quiet waitress who avoided trouble. She was the woman who had faced monsters and still stood tall. Logan stopped by sometimes, sitting in the corner booth with his coffee, watching her with a proud, quiet smile. They didn't talk much about that day. They didn't need to. What happened had forged something unbreakable between them. He saw her not as someone to protect anymore, but as someone who had finally learned to carry her own fire. The diner walls, once a silent witness to cruelty, now carried a sense of power. Every person who walked in could feel it. The story whispered through the town had given the place a kind of sacred weight. And though Emily never sought vengeance, she carried a quiet warning in her eyes. Kindness was a choice, but crossing certain lines came with consequences. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that strength and love often come from the most painful moments, please like, comment, and share this video. Your support helps keep these stories alive and brings light to people who need to hear them. Before you go, comment below. Do you believe in second chances, even for those who've done wrong? Because sometimes the difference between a villain and a hero is who they choose to protect when no one else will.